Many of us would love the opportunity to live on our own private island, and they're some of the best places to live during the zombie apocalypse. However, many islands have been cursed throughout history, and no matter how hard some people try to establish something here on these islands, it always ends in failure, or simply because no one wants to buy them. From islands that were used to test horrifying biological agents, to islands you really shouldn't go to even for vacation, here are islands that no one wants to live on. But first, we'd like to thank you guys for leaving all the great comments. Keep it up, and maybe we'll feature you in an upcoming video. Number 13. Doxa Island. This little island at first glance would appear to be a great place to start some kind of resort or tourist attraction. It's only 1.5 miles from Dubrovnik and is home to a 19th century lighthouse and even a historical monument. Croatia offered to sell it as a private island at a mysteriously low €2 million. This would make it seem like a bargain for whoever has the money. So why has it gone unsold and underdeveloped? It turns out that this was the island where the Doxa massacre took place in 1944, where men were accused of collaborating with the Germans and were executed. Excavations found 53 skeletons and only 18 of them have been identified. That's certainly not going to make a real estate agent's job any more easier. The locals of Dubrovnik say that this island is still haunted by those who lost their lives here. Number 12. North Sentinel Island. Efforts to make contact with the natives here have ceased, and no one's allowed to come within a 3-mile radius of this island. North Sentinel Island is located in the Bay of Bengal in the Indian Ocean, and it's inhabited by a tribe of people who don't want you to visit them. They've lived here on this island for 60,000 years and won't go without a fight. They've refused meeting outsiders, and normally anyone that even comes close is met with a barrage of primitive weapons such as arrows, spears, and rocks. In 2006, 2 people who were fishing just a little bit too close to the beaches of this island were killed. An Indian anthropologist who attempted to make contact with the tribe and his crew was quickly met with aggression. There could be as little as 40 people here, but many believe the population is about 500. We just don't know. Dense forestation here seems to make it a little bit difficult to do any aerial reconnaissance on. The truth about this place still remains a mystery. Number 11. Gruniard Island. Located in northwestern Scotland, this oval-shaped island is only about 1 mile wide and 1/2 mile long. It's been home to some mysterious incidents in the past. It was once full of trees, but it's now completely treeless. In 1942, British military scientists chose this island as a testing site for biological weapons during the Second World War. In order to test anthrax as a weapon of mass destruction, it was bombarded with several anthrax bombs, using sheep as their test dummies. To no one's surprise, all the sheep died. People began complaining about dead bodies of animals washing up on Scottish beaches well after the testing and the supposed cleanup. The site is also a no-go zone on Google Maps. Number 10. Nauru. The smallest island nation in the world is Nauru, located east of Australia. Life on this island is not too amazing, and we're not going to sugarcoat anything. The tiny island was exploited for its heavy deposits of phosphate, which is normally used for fertilizer. The country enjoyed a steady income during the 1980s. Nowadays, all the phosphate is gone, and the country has a 90% unemployment rate. This country also leads the world in obesity, with roughly 40% of its citizens suffering from obesity. Number 9. Elenor Atoll. Over 23 massive nuclear and hydrogen bombs were dropped here. This photo shows a massive concrete lid placed over the crater known as the Tomb. This was from a nuclear test called Cactus in their attempt to contain the radioactive materials left over. And this is what they built. Many strange experiments took place on this atoll, including one called Operation Ivy. They even tested airplanes flying through mushroom clouds after hydrogen bomb detonations to see how radioactive they can get. Bikini Island now is deemed uninhabitable for the next 24,000 years due to all the plutonium that's scattered here. Workers on this island began suffering from many health issues related to the radiation exposure, and the government even tried to convince the locals here that it's totally safe to live again in 1980. 8. Henderson Island. Deemed as completely uninhabitable by the United Nations, Henderson Island was virtually untouched by man's existence until single plastic materials began washing up on the shores. Henderson Island is extremely remote, and it makes up a part of the Pitcairn Islands, a British overseas territory. A recently published report stated that it had the highest density of plastic rubbish anywhere in the world. So if no one lives here, how the heck is there so much plastic everywhere? It's because of what's known as the South Pacific Gear, and there's an estimated 37.7 million items of debris, making it one of the most toxic places on Earth. The ocean's current and the Coriolis effect help the large amounts of plastic drift to this remote place. This photo here shows a coconut crab that's stuck inside a plastic container, and that's only the tip of the iceberg. The British government has tried to convince people to move to the Pitcairn Islands, but due to its isolation and strange pollution, no one wants to live here. Number 7. Bikini Atoll. Once the USA had captured much land in the South Pacific during the 1940s from the Japanese, they wanted to continue testing out their nuclear capabilities. Bikini Atoll was where the US tested their most powerful equipment, things such as hydrogen bombs. Castle Bravo was the code name for the dry fuel hydrogen bomb. Once it was detonated, it was the second most powerful device ever detonated, only behind Russia's Tsar Bomba. Bikini Atoll was the site for 67 nuclear detonations, making it radioactive in the process. Researchers from Colombia and the US recently found that the islands are still toxic, and the natives are beginning to realize that they'll never return home. People here are still dealing with the fallout as a result. Compensation has been demanded by the natives. Cleanup of the islands has already cost the US over $1 billion tax dollars at least. Number 6. Hawaii Islands. It might be your dream to move to the Hawaiian Islands someday, but even if you can't afford to live there, you might not necessarily be welcomed. Housing prices have gone through the roof, making it next to impossible to have an average paying job and live somewhere. The state ranks 43rd overall for education, and private schools here are also unaffordable. The average price for a single family home on the island of Oahu was $795,000, and for a condo, $415,000. The traffic is also unbearable, and a typical 30-minute drive can easily turn to 2 hours. Also, if you're not a native Hawaiian, you'll typically be looked at as an outsider and not given a warm welcome from their people. Other people who've moved there have complained about the lack of food diversity as well. Number 5. Fort Carrol. If you're looking to own your own zombie apocalypse hideout, we think we found the perfect spot. Fort Carrol is a sea fort that was built in the shape of a hexagon. Back in 1847, the military decided that they needed a fort to protect the city of Baltimore in the case of a foreign invasion. When the first major global conflict broke out, the army decided that they needed the guns and the military equipment here, and they removed them from the fort. In 1921, they formally abandoned the fort and moved the rest of the stuff to Fort Howard nearby. The city of Baltimore attempted to sell the island for $10,000, and a man named Benjamin Eisenberg took them up on the offer. He wanted to construct a casino, but the idea never fell through. Number 4. Palmyra Island. Located about 1,000 miles away from Hawaii, the isolation of this island isn't the only reason why no one wants to live here. It's also one of the few true uninhabited islands in the South Pacific, and travelers often mention that it has a dark, cursed past. Even back during the Second Global Conflict, many submarines and ships would tend to get lost within its vicinity, and that's when they deemed it as cursed. A grisly homicide took place here in the 1970s, and a woman named Elenor Graham's skull and remains were found on the beach. The couple had been exploring the Pacific on their yacht when they encountered another couple named Walker and Stearns. Forensic analysis of Elenor would prove that horrible things happened to her. Some believe that the husband committed the crime and disappeared, while Walker was convicted and proclaims his innocence. You can read more about this case in the book titled And the Sea Will Tell. There's also a docu-drama on YouTube if you don't like to read. Number 3. Isola La Gaelo. This seemingly beautiful island is found in the Gulf of Naples in the Mediterranean Sea, and despite it being pretty to look at, it seems like an island that's cursed. People had tried to live here since Roman times, but eventually it served as a defensive island to protect Naples from invaders. It received a bad reputation since the 19th century, when it was said that a hermit wizard lived there and constructed the abandoned villa that we see today. Since 1920, everyone else who's lived there has received a terrible fate not long after. One of the first who tried to live there was Hans Braun from Switzerland, who became the victim of a horrible crime and was found wrapped in a rug. His wife had also drowned in the surrounding sea. After much horrible stuff happened here that we can't get into, the island was eventually deemed as property for the government. This should help prevent anyone else from moving in. Number 2. Charles Island, Connecticut. This island has been cursed many times in the past, and you probably will get an eerie feeling if you step foot here today. Located off the coast of Connecticut is this 14-acre island, which would seemingly be a great place for a summer home or something. The island was considered to be a sacred location to local tribes, and they put a curse on it as settlers began to show up. Perhaps coincidentally or supernaturally, any tobacco plantations on this island have failed to grow. Not long after, another curse would be placed on this island by a legendary pirate named Captain Kidd. It's rumored that he buried his treasure on this island, and that anyone who stepped foot here will succumb to a quick expiration. In any case, some people refuse to believe in the curse, but any business that got started here ended in failure. And number 1. Montserrat. Located in the Caribbean, Montserrat is one of the most beautiful uninhabited islands in the world, despite some efforts from the British. A horrific volcanic explosion took place here, and it's certainly not a welcoming view. Imagine seeing a volcano steaming from gases relentlessly from the peak while you're sitting at home looking through your window. Here in this photo from the 1990s, we see the capital of the British Overseas Territory completely draped in ash. To this day, this area surrounding Soufriere Hills is covered in a sharp volcanic glass and not the fine white sands you prefer to see in the Caribbean. Very few have returned to this island after the eruption, but they should be fearing for their lives.